Hi, this is Dr. Joe Green, head pastor of Antioch Assembly Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Also the founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. This issue of race is just so much engulfing the public's attention in these last couple of years. And so I want to talk about racism just a little bit and define some terms and see how we move forward. If you've been following the 2019 movement, it's about reconciliation, restoration. It's about combating some of these ills that have been perpetrated against one group of people over another. But first, like I said, we always have to define terms. Racism involves institutional and systematic mistreatment of people based on the racial makeup. I want to make a statement that people and groups that practice racism didn't change teams, they simply changed their strategy. Instead of being out in the open with racism, they covered it up and repackaged it. And the reason it's important to identify what racism actually is because a lot of times people confuse racism with bias or prejudice. And the reason you have to define it is because you can actually do something about racism. You may not be able to do something to combat bias or prejudice. People are naturally prejudiced in all different types of aspects. So, but racism is systematic and it's institutional. Because it's institutional and systematic, you can do something about it. And what happens is, as a society, when we confuse racism with bias or prejudice, that we end up alienating certain people that may or may not even be racist, or may not be racist, I should say. And when you don't really identify true racism, and you just throw out this kind of coverall blanket for things where people, have differences of views or opinions, a lot of times you'll just perpetuate hatred and animosity, and inversely, you'll get pushback from people on the opposite of the aisle that didn't have anything to do with the issue that you're trying to address. And when you fan the flames of racism, it's like crying wolf. When you say everything's racism, then it actually loses its power. Because if everything is racism, then there is no racism. And so it's important for us to understand it. And now you get people that start to defend themselves or push back because they've been offended because they weren't the problem. They weren't the real initiators of the real problem that you're trying to fight against. For instance, there's an overbearing push to defend the rights of illegal Mexican and South American immigrants from the Obama administration and now as a society as a whole. And, there's people that never even thought of the issue of illegal immigration or they weren't really affected by it. But now they're pushing back because there's an overbearing thing to defend illegal immigrants. There's a young lady in Iowa that just recently got killed by an illegal immigrant. And because of society's overbearing push to protect and defend this issue, they're more concerned with people talking about illegal immigration than the life of this young lady, this innocent young lady, 20 years old, I believe, who got killed by an illegal immigrant. And what many people were saying is that if we were properly enforcing the immigration laws in the country, that this may have been avoided. So what the power structure does is they have what's called the Hegelian dialectic, and you probably have heard me talk about this many times. You have a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis. So it's a problem, and then they also offer the solution. They control both sides of the issue, and then they have a preset solution that's already been established. I'll give you an example. The United States wanted to go into Vietnam. Some people speculate that the international bankers wanted to go into Vietnam to control the poppy fields in Vietnam. That's the speculation. And it's no coincidence that the same time the United States Army occupied Vietnam, there was an influx of opioid products into the United States, like heroin and different things in the 60s and early 70s. And at the time, Vietnam was one of the largest producers of poppy seeds. So, some people may think that that's a conspiracy theory, but I don't think it's a coincidence. And incidentally, Afghanistan is also a large producer of poppy, which is the basis for opioid products. And Now in America we have an influx of heroin and other opioids in the United States. Um, Coincidence? I don't think so. Anyway, you had what was called the Gulf of Tonkin, and so what the two U.S. ships said that they got fired on, or there was a report that two U.S. ships got fired on by the North Vietnamese, and LBJ used this as the basis for us going to war with Vietnam. The reason we know that this was a false flag event was because of the fact that declassified documents from 2005, an internal National Security Agency historical study that was declassified, showed that this never happened, that it was a staged event. Also in 1995, General McNamara, he met with a former Vietnam People's Army general, and they came to the conclusion that nothing actually happened. It was a staged event. It really didn't happen. It was a false flag event. So when you talk about the Hegelian dialectic, they wanted to go into Vietnam, so they staged this event, and they gave the solution, which we have to go occupy Vietnam in order to fight back against communism, is what they said that they were doing. The powers that be have been trying to create a socialist utopia that's controlled by the international bankers for many decades. And so, based on the Hegelian dialectic, we can look at some of the things that happened. So in 1929, you had the crash of the stock market, and FDR brings forth what's called the New Deal, which gave the federal government a lot of influence in the individual lives of Americans and provided a safety net for people. So you have the Social Security Administration that's created. You also have the Internal Revenue Service that was created a little bit after that. But in 1913, on Jekyll Island, they had what was called the Federal Reserve Act, which gave the Federal Reserve power to oversee the money production in America. And so in 1929, with the stock market crash, it put the U.S. government into bankruptcy. And so the Federal Reserve steps in, and now they are the executor of the United States bankruptcy, which is why if you look on your money, it's called a Federal Reserve note. So the Federal Reserve loans money to banking institutions and to the United States government, and they charge interest. So if their goal was to get the international bankers involved and create a socialistic society, then something like the 1929 stock market crash could be seen as part of their Hegelian dialectic. So you had FDR, who was a Democrat, and like I said, the Democrats, the liberals, the progressives, all are pushing certain policies that move towards socialism. And so with the New Deal FDR created, it also put the government in place where the safety net for Americans, it had more control over individual families and individual lives of the United States government. Then you had LBJ, who was also a Democrat. He came up with what was called the Great Society and the war on poverty during the Civil Rights movement. So it could be speculated that one of the ways that, because slavery, chattel slavery was racism, it was institutional, and it was systematic. Then you had Jim Crow laws in the South and other places that was systematic, institutional racism. And so because public opinion changed and people weren't okay with open shows of racism, it could be speculated that those who had the same ideology just changed their strategy. They changed how they wanted to oppress and control blacks and lower income people. So with LBJ's The Great Society, the war on poverty created a welfare system that was engineered and orchestrated to perpetuate people in a poverty dependency on the government mindset. And that's not a knock on anybody who's been on welfare. Welfare was, it can give you a temporary cushion while you're in a rough spot. We've all gone through rough patches. But I'm saying how it's set up, how it was engineered, it was to create a dependency on the government long term. It destroyed families, so our family structure is much weaker than it ever was. And it also, instead of the black community depending on God and depending on family like we did for many generations, they now have more of a dependency on the government and less of a dependency on family and God. And it also perpetuates bad behavior. So along with that, you also had the eugenics program, which is about population control. Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist. And so she created Planned Parenthood, which is why Planned Parenthood clinics, 80% of them are in or near poor black and other minority, mainly poor black neighborhoods. The majority of Planned Parenthood centers are in these areas. Now, if you understand socialism, socialism long term, it hinders, it stifles people. It's not a good idea. And first of all, the only thing, socialism doesn't create wealth. It only takes wealth from one group and gives it to another. So socialism takes wealth from people that actually have earned the wealth or who possess the wealth and give it to people who haven't necessarily earned it. And long term, it doesn't cause people to desire to maximize their gifts and their talents or their ideas, because the only thing that the government does is it identifies the best and the brightest and the smartest, and their talents are used to better the government, the collective. Think about Russia, Soviet Russia. They had some great athletes that used to compete in the Olympics against American athletes, and many times they would win. But after the Olympics were over, the Russians, because their talents were only meant to promote Russia, Soviet Union, the American athletes would come home and they were able to earn millions of dollars using their talents and their abilities. So that's the difference in socialism and what we have as a capitalistic society. If you're talented, if you're gifted, you should be able to benefit from those God-given talents and gifts. Like I said, chattel slavery was racism because it was institutional, it was systematic. And so the people that really wanted to control the black population, they actually changed their strategies, because LBJ was a racist. Ultimately, what happens in a socialistic society is that people, it perpetuates victim mentality. It perpetuates the idea that you can't survive unless the government or the system helps you. That's what it perpetuates. And so welfare and abortion are some of the racist policies that were actually implemented to cause not only a socialistic society, but it basically took black people off a physical plantation and put them on an emotional and physical and mental plantation. And this victim mentality that's being perpetrated. Because, I mean, recently, I don't know if you've heard that now LeBron James, they're promoting him. He's basically a globalist, New World Order puppet, like many people of his talents and gifts. And he's being just used, just like they did in the Soviet Union. They use these athletes to promote the state or the collective ideologies. And that's what he's doing. You know, just for the record, that the school that he created, it's a public school. He gave a little bit of money, a donation. When I say a little bit, is a lot for us, but he didn't give as much money as they tried. He didn't pay for the school or build it. It's a public school, and he just gave a donation, and so they put his name on it, but they promoted it as though it's his school. And you know, the scholarships that the children will get to the University of Akron, it's actually being subsidized primarily by the school. So the taxpayers and the college is paying most of the bill. But because they are promoting him as this figurehead for the ideologies that they're promoting, they name the school after him. But here's the mentality that he's promoting. He recently stated that no matter how much money you have, being black in America is tough. Now, this man is worth almost $1 billion. He's worth over $500 million at least. He's on television. He has power and influence. He has 2 houses in LA. He has one in Cleveland and probably Miami and all over the place. But he's trying to promote this victim mentality of how rough it is in America. And, you know, for the average person, you should be offended by that statement. It's not a true statement. It's not tough for a person who's worth almost $1 billion. If you look at the circles he runs around in, the biggest, best, and brightest names out there. It's a facade. It's a false flag, basically, to use that. And it's perpetuating victim mentality. Because think about this: if he's worth almost $1 billion, what does that say to the average, everyday working person who's not worth almost $1 billion? It's perpetuating a lie that everything's terrible, and no matter what you do, nothing ever will work out for you. You think about this victim mentality that you have these $1 million professional athletes kneeling to talk about how unfair America is for minorities, even though they make 30 times the national average. So The NFL, the average salary in the NFL is $1.2 million. The average salary for a United States citizen working in America is $40,000 a year. So they make 30 times more than the average salary, but yet they're telling people how unfair life is. And the sentiment is that we can't even change our own community, even if we have the resources, the influence, and the power to do so. We can't change it. We need the system. We need the man. It's to cause more of a dependency on the man to fix our problems instead of us being able to fix our own. Now, if you follow the 2019 movement, this is about the patterns, the principles of the Bible. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 7, it says, "And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows, so I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from the land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me. I have also seen the oppression which the Egyptians oppress them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." So in order to succeed, this is our stance of the 2019 movement. We have to trust God. We have to stand on moral, biblical principles, principles of family, sexual morality, self-dependence, valuing every single human life as a gift from God, and using our talents and resources to create what God has intended for us to have. It's about walking into the God-given destiny of a people. We just have to understand, see the strategy and the schemes of the enemy so that he doesn't gain the advantage of us. Till next time, peace and blessings to you. Shalom, shalom.